Hey guys, wanted to share something really cool with you. We've been launching our Pain to Purpose course in churches all over the world now, and it's been amazing to see how many people are finding hope and healing in the midst of their trauma through this course being offered at their local church. First of all, I just want to celebrate that. We're bringing healing conversations back into the church. Secondly, I wanted to let you know how you can partner with us to get the course launched at your church. I know most of you listening may not be a pastor or a church leader, but chances are you know one. And what you may not know is how overwhelming it can be for pastors to walk with so many people through pain and trauma in their church. Now, the reality is most pastors feel ill-equipped for the task of helping navigate the difficult stories and tragedies that many of their congregants are facing. And we're passionate about helping churches feel equipped and engaging pain and trauma, which ultimately leads to transformation and healing, not just for the church, but for the surrounding community. So if you're a pastor, I want to invite you to join me and our local church director, Ken Roberts, on a Zoom call that we hold twice a month just for pastors and church leaders. And if you know a pastor, which is probably most of you guys watching this, we'd love for you to get this information in their hands. This interactive Zoom call will give you the opportunity to hear from other pastors on how the Pain to Purpose course has positively impacted their churches. We'll give you the resources and tools that will lighten the load of your church staff, and we'll show you how we'd love to help you as you're helping the people within your congregation heal. Because we're passionate about the same thing that you are, people moving through their pain and stepping into mission in their local church and community. So if you're not a pastor, why not share this incredible opportunity with your pastor? Let your pastor know about this call so they can learn more about the ways Nothing is Wasted wants to partner with them in bringing hope and healing to your church. To sign up for the next Zoom call, just go to nothingiswasted.com/pastors. The link will be below this and will be on all of the podcast platforms in their show notes. There you can choose a date to join us whenever it's most convenient for you. If you're not a pastor, this link is an easy one to send to your local church leaders with a little note about how Nothing is Wasted has personally impacted your own healing journey. Now, as someone who has served as a pastor and as someone who has walked through unimaginable trauma, I know that a key part of revival within the body of Christ is going to come from how we as the church step into pain and trauma with those who are hurting. Let me help you find a clear, proven path with ready-made tools and resources for your church body. Pastors, I really feel like this Zoom call is exactly what you've been looking for in serving your church more effectively in their pain. Sign up today, nothingiswasted.com/pastors, or share that link with a pastor in your life, and let's partner with God in helping others move from pain to purpose. Hello and welcome to the Nothing is Wasted podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Davey Blackburn, and joining me,
one of your other hosts, Aubrey Sampson. This is a big episode I get to be here for, Davey.
It's a massive episode, Aubrey. Oh my gosh, guess what? Happy 300th episode.
Happy 300th episode. Davey,
can you believe it?
And I was going to ask you that because you've been here obviously since day zero, ground zero, day one.
Goodness.
How does it feel for you to be saying 300 episodes?
It feels surreal.
Yeah.
I would have never guessed when we started this that we would be 300 episodes deep one day.
Come on. How many years?
Not a chance in the world.
Has it taken to get to 300?
June of 2017 was our very first episode. So, and until the beginning of 2019, so from June of 2017 all the way to the end of 2018, we were releasing one episode every other week.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So we were in kind of a snail's pace because it was while I was still pastoring the church, and we just didn't have the capacity by any means to be able to keep producing episodes. And then in 2019, when we stepped away from the church and we started doing this full time, we were like, well, one of the things we've got to do is double down on the podcast, release one every week. And here we are.
Unbelievable. God is good. Like, that is the faithfulness of God and the faithfulness of your obedience and Christy's obedience and all the incredible team. Can I share some of this data? Because this is kind of cool.
Yeah, absolutely. It is really cool.
Most people would be like, well, what does that mean? 300 episodes. That represents 300 stories. And think about that. Stories of hope and healing in the midst of suffering and pain. Like, you know, I don't know. Like, let's just pause there and say, praise Jesus.
I know.
Right?
I know.
And then this part's the part that's crazy to me, Davey. 2.3 million downloads.
Yeah.
That means 2.3 million people have downloaded episodes and listened
Isn't that crazy?
to them. No, I don't get that.
And that means that actually that number started at the beginning of 2019.
Oh, that's
so
right.
All the stuff in 2018, 17, we didn't even have data for that. Wasn't even. So that number started then. So it could be, it'd be more than that at some point. We don't know what that is, but isn't that wild?
Awesome. It's so awesome. God is so good.
It's incredible. Incredible. And what's really cool about it is you're right. It's these stories, and it's these stories that it keeps blowing my mind. First of all, the stories that we get, the stories that we begin that we're able to tell. I'm in awe every time I'm doing an interview. You're doing an interview. It's amazing. The other thing I'm in awe about is how far reaching this is. We will meet people that randomly have listened to our podcast. I mean, you were telling me,
can
Aubrey,
I tell the story? I was in Dominican Republic on a mission trip with some friends. Wild. Sitting in a restaurant, met some people from the Dominican, connected to the ministry, but not me. It wasn't like they knew me or knew my people, but they were like, we're just asking questions, talking about what we do. And my friend Chris, who knows them, said, oh, you should listen to Aubrey's podcast sometime. It's called Nothing is Wasted. She does it with another pastor named Davey. And they were both like, wait, what? Wait. And all of a sudden they're putting together, oh, you're Aubrey Sampson. Oh, Davey Blah.
Oh, and my
so here are two Dominicans who literally are not in my world until this very moment. And the Lord had brought them to Nothing is Wasted. So that was cool.
It's wild.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Wild. We've met someone in Mexico. I remember Christy and I were we were on our honeymoon, and someone randomly came up to us at the resort and was like, hey, I'm a listener of the podcast.
Stop.
And we're like,
stop.
What?
Stop. Stop.
It was wild. Well, what's even funnier is that it was actually in the bathroom.
No, it wasn't.
So like this woman sees Christy in the bathroom and goes, oh my gosh, I listen to Nothing.
Oh, that's awkward. That's weird.
Very awkward.
But I mean, that's so cool. And
did you say you had another person that came up to you and said, I love listening to you and
I love listening to you and Stevie so much. I was speaking at a Barna event, the Resilient Pastor event, and this bless his heart. He's a faithful listener, so he's probably listening now.
That's amazing.
But he came up and said he loved the podcast, loved the ministry, and loves me and Stevie so much.
Listen,
and I just didn't correct him.
You just made my he or whoever this was made my day when you said it, because that's been our aim, is like that people don't know. I know, I'm sorry, I'm sobering up the moment, but people don't know my name. They don't know your name. They know the name of Jesus. That's the whole point of this entire podcast. Yeah. And believe me, I've been called worse. So it's Aubrey and Stevie
the
right here.
Stevie show.
It actually is catchier.
Stevie is a little catchier than Davey.
I think
Stevie Blackburn.
It is.
Yeah, there might be a future for you though. Hey, for the 300th episode, we have an amazing guest.
Goodness,
America's pastor is on the show today.
America's pastor, literally. That's
I've always said if I had a Mount Rushmore of pastors, he would definitely be on this.
He would be on it. He would be on
Max
it.
Lucado.
Yeah, it's Max Lucado.
Did I ruin the thunder? Right. You were supposed to say it for the 300th.
No, you didn't ruin it at all. I was trying to figure out how to tee up the Lucado kind of controversy because
what do you say?
Yeah, because people pronounce it well. In the interview, I actually asked him that question.
So we'll find out what he
So we cleared up right out of the gate. I thought I was being cute and clever, and he was like, yeah, I get asked that question.
He was probably like, this is annoying.
Oh, man. I thought it was like nobody's ever asked him this. Cutting-edge journalist getting to the bottom of this mystery that everybody has wanted to know.
Question. Oh, man. Okay, so you're not going to tell me. We'll have to wait until after to find out.
I'm not telling you. You're going to have to listen. That's right. And afterwards... That's right. And Aubrey and I are going to stick around afterwards. We're going to have some more conversation about this interview with Max Lucado, but I'm kind of giving it away right now. But you got to hear a story. He's got a funny story about how something he did with this. But I mean, if you don't know who Max Lucado is, you're going to get to know him here in a second. Prolific author, America's pastor. And he has a book that he's just released called God Never Gives Up on You. And it's the story of Jacob, which I love.
Yeah, you do love the Jacob story. Yeah.
Oh, I love the Jacob story. And it's so, I think, crucial to our grieving journeys, our healing journeys. So the subtitle, What Jacob's Story Teaches Us About Grace, Mercy, and God's Relentless Love. It is an incredible book, an incredible interview. Stick around afterwards if you want to hear what Aubrey and I have to say about it. And also, if you're looking to take a next step, if this is maybe you're new to the ministry or you're just looking to kind of get your toes in the water a little bit more, you're looking for how you can begin your healing journey, I want to invite you on a Zoom call that I do every once in a while. It's, sometimes twice a month, sometimes once a month. But you can register at nothingiswasted.com/start here. And the Zoom call is called 5 Steps to Taking Back Your Story.
Yeah, it's so worthwhile. It's so worth your time if you're new to Nothing is Wasted.
Really good.
Yeah.
Really good. So, all right, let's listen to my conversation with Max Lucado. Well, Max Lucado, it is such an honor to have you on the Nothing is Wasted podcast. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Davey. It's a great, great privilege. Thanks for allowing me these moments to chat.
I always thought if I could ever have a conversation with you, it seems really trite right now, but the first question I would ask would be Lucado or Lucado. I don't know if you've ever been asked that before, but that's the thing that spins around in my head.
I ask that all the time. There's a funny story about that, Davey. It's been quite a few years now, but a friend invited me to come to his office one Christmas and speak at their Christmas luncheon, and it was some kind of financial office. And a lady saw me, and she said, "Hey, I've read your books," and she began taking me around the office, introducing me to all of the people in the office, and she was introducing me as Max Lucado every time. Max Lucado, Max Lucado. Well, she was so enthusiastic and talking so fast that I couldn't correct her. And after she had said it 7 or 8 times, I couldn't bring myself to correct her. Well, finally, one person said, "Oh, you're Max Lucado," after she had said it, and he said, "I always thought it was Lucado." And I didn't know what to do, Davey. I didn't. I thought, I don't want to embarrass her. So I lied. I said it's Lucado. It's the only time in my whole life I've done that. I just didn't know what to do.
That's amazing.
But it doesn't matter. I go by anything.
You'll answer to both now, I guess, these days.
Yeah.
Well, let's set the record straight. It is Max Lucado. And man, we're so honored to have you joining us. You're a prolific author. You're a pastor. You've been a major voice in my own story personally, as well as so many others who are listening to this and watching this. And so we're honored to have you on here. You're coming out your latest book is God Never Gives Up on You. And the subtitle is What Jacob's Story Teaches Us About Grace, Mercy, and God's Relentless Love. I love the fact that you have written now on Jacob, because it's something that I, no pun intended, wrestle with quite a bit. We talk about it a lot in our ministry, about the importance of wrestling with God, especially in the dark night of the soul, the tragedies that we undergo in our life, the trauma that we undergo in our life. I wonder, before we kind of step into that, can you just tell me what about your story really inspired you to begin to speak into other people's lives, their faith journeys, their relationship with Jesus? What really got you moving in that direction?
I was drunk when I was 20 years of age. I was about a 6-pack a night guy. I was a trouble. I was not the guy that any dad or mom would want their daughter to date. I was not respectful of authority, not respectful of ladies, and I was a kind of a tough dude, fighter, pretty sold on myself. I was raised in West Texas around cowboys and football, and I just was kind of Mr. Macho. And I was a mess. Alcoholism is the blight in our family tree, and my brother died as a result of alcoholism. And I don't have any way of knowing for sure, but I feel pretty confident that I would have followed on that same track. And my dad said that if I wanted help with college tuition, I had to go to a Christian college. Well, I may be dumb, but I'm not stupid, So there was a college nearby, it's a great school called Abilene Christian University, and this was back in the 1970s. And so I went, and part of the requirement was to take Bible courses, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And I had just the greatest Bible teacher, just the greatest Bible teacher who had a genuine love for the Lord. And that was contagious. And my heart began to soften, my life began to change. And so that's a very long answer to your very good question. But I've always had a heart for people who, like me, just really blew it. Just really were screwing life up. Even though I had great parents, even though I had a great small town I grew up in, I couldn't blame my environment. I had every opportunity in the world, but I was on the verge of really blowing it. And and so the grace of God is what wrecked me. That He could forgive a jerk like me really shook me up, and it had its intended impact on me. And so I think that's why I've been a real. That's been my message for people, that God really doesn't give up on us. The title of this book, that He really pursues us and loves us, and so that's where a lot of my world comes from.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I mean, you said it's threaded so much in the story of Jacob, and then the book that you have written on this Bible character, and what's really, we as we minister and interact with people, we find that there are a lot of people, especially in the deep, dark places of their life, where they feel like God has abandoned them, where He's not there, and they just wonder, where is He showing up in my story? Where is He showing up in my life? And especially when you seem to be the perpetrator of your own pain. There's so much shame that, we talk about 4 perpetrators of pain a lot in our ministry: our own sinful choices, other people's sinful choices, the fact that we live in a fallen and broken world under the curse of sin, and spiritual attack. Those seem to be the 4 major buckets that pain kind of stems from. But when you get that one where it's like what you're talking about, that maybe I'm the reason, I'm the culprit here for why I'm experiencing this kind of pain, it can be very difficult to come up out of that. How do you, as you're talking to people, as you're ministering, as you're writing for people who have experienced that kind of pain, which we all have, right? We all fall short of the glory of God. But how do we get out from underneath that shame to really step into the fullness of what God has for us?
I think those 4 sources, I don't think I've ever heard it presented like that. I think that it really seems thorough. I'm trying to think of anything else. But yeah. And in the story of Jacob, he is this picture of a person to whom God had made a covenant, and the covenant was really made to his grandfather Abraham, that God would bless the world through Abraham's lineage, and that included Jacob. So God never abandoned that covenant. And I think really core to our understanding of God is the fact that He's a covenant-keeping God. He's a promise-keeping God, and He knows the end from the beginning. And for Him, a promise is not a desire; it's a decree. It's a declaration. And so He's declared this. Now, Jacob did not have to have the hurts and the pain that he had in life. He endured many of these seasons of isolation and struggle because of poor choices that he made. He did bring those onto himself, like I brought onto myself many of the struggles that I had and the struggles that I have had in my life. But the covenant that God made, the big loyal covenant that God made, I wonder if an analogy, tell me if this works. If it doesn't, I'll apologize for it. But I think a healthy marriage can be a covenant, a picture of God's covenant. Because when 2 people say, I'm going to stick with you regardless, then that takes the fear of the ejection seat or the sneaking out the back door out of the picture. We're going to fight through this together. We're going to stick through this together. And that there's still going to be tension. There's still going to be grumpiness. There's still going to be challenges, bad days, good days, sickness, and so forth. There's still going to be uphill battles. But the promise is still there. The promise is still there. And I think that's what Jacob models, what God models for us in the life of Jacob. Jacob fumbled and stumbled really more than he stood or made progress, and yet the promise of God was there every time, and he was faithful. He was faithful in the end.
Wow, that's so good. Yeah, we referenced this a little bit earlier in the conversation, just about this pivotal moment, this critical juncture in Jacob's life where he wrestled with God. It seems like that was quite a pivot in his own life. Mm-hmm. I'm really curious, maybe this is a twofold question. When you look at that passage and you study it, what are the major things that you draw from that passage in terms of that altercation between, God, Jacob, and then what does that mean for us? Especially when we get to these places where we're wrestling with God. And I say it with this context, Max. We're continually telling people in their pain, we're encouraging, we as a ministry, we're saying, hey, listen, wrestle with God in this pain. Mm-hmm. Don't take the questions that you inevitably have, tuck them in your back pocket and run away from God. Take these really difficult questions to God, wrestle with him. So how, as you look at that passage, how can that maybe color that challenge that we have for people in the middle of their pain?
Hi, friend. I wanted to take a quick minute to connect you with a free resource that I know will be helpful in your Pain to Purpose journey. It's our free 7-day devotional that you can sign up for right now. With it, you'll get 7 daily devotionals written by our founder, Davey Blackburn, delivered to your inbox each morning. These are adapted from our Pain to Purpose 42-day devotional and are full of daily scripture readings, questions to reflect upon, and prayer prompts to help you focus your heart. If you're looking for some encouragement in whatever you're facing, this is it, and it's free. You just have to go to devo.nothingiswasted.com to sign up. I don't know your story, but what I do know is that God isn't done with it. Whether you've endured a recent loss, a divorce, an unexpected diagnosis, or some other pain point, God wants to give you hope when it seems like it is lost. Let's take 7 days together to find that hope in whatever you're walking through. Sign up today at devo.nothingiswasted.com.
Well, Jacob was the second born of a set of twins. The older was Esau. He swindled Esau out of the birthright. He lied to his father, ran away because Esau wanted to kill him, spent 20 years in Mesopotamia, racking up a whole new series of stories that are both convicting and entertaining. And then to get back to Canaan, God told him to go back to Canaan. In order to go back home, he had to pass through the territory of Esau. By this point, Esau was a baron of sorts. He had about 400 militiamen. And so he didn't know if his brother was going to hug him or strangle him. The night before his encounter with Esau is when this mysterious, transcendent moment occurred. It's just, I really list it. It makes my short list of you forced me to choose the 5 most fascinating moments in the Bible, and Jacob wrestling with God in the mud of Jabbok would be one of them. Jacob, in Jacob fashion, sends his family across the river, so I guess they could be a buffer in case Esau's in a bad mood. And he stays back, and we're not told why. We just know he's there. And so he's spending the night on the banks of the river, and this stranger pounces on him. And stranger is a word that some translations use. Just this person, this being, pounces on him. And all night long they wrestle. Slippery, muddy, wet, sweaty bodies, rolling, turning, pinning, pulling, grappling, pinhold, one thing after. All night long they wrestle. And there comes the point as the sun begins to break that Jacob thinks that he's going to come out on top. And just when he thinks he is going to come out on top, this stranger, who Jacob himself later identifies as God, just touches him on the hip and leaves him with a limp the rest of his life. And there's an interesting little play on words in the Hebrew I came to learn, that not only did it mess with his hip, it messed with his manhood. And so he was really left with the rest of his life remembering how he wrestled with God. And the minute he thought that he had God pinned down, God pinned him down. But the minute that he thought that God pinned him down, God did this. God said, now, what is your name? What is your name? And we know that the name Jacob, there's a evolution of the name that goes back to mean cheat or fraud or trickster.
Right.
And to me it seems, Davey, I may be wrong, but it seems to me that God is saying, now who are you? And Jacob is saying, I've been a cheat. I've been working the system. I've been running from the truth all this time. And so Jacob acknowledges that this wrestling that he finally owns up to some of this himself. And the minute he does, God says, okay, now I'm going to change your name. And you're not going to be called Jaco, or you're not going to be called cheat anymore. I'm going to call you Israel. And there are people who are a lot smarter than I am who are still trying to understand all the significance of the name Israel. But the one thing that I like about the name is it can mean, doesn't have to mean, but it can mean the God who fights. The God who fights. It can mean I fought with God, but it also can mean the God who fights. I may be just disclosing my bias here, Davey, but it seems to me God is saying, okay, Jacob, you've admitted that you've confessed, but from now on, I'm going to be the God who fights for you.
Wow.
It's just a beautiful, mystical, wonderful moment. For the rest of his life, he said, God fought for me. What's your name? Oh, God fights. And gives somebody a card, says, my name is the God who fights. And it was that inflection point in his life, and he was, changed him forever.
Wow.
You know something about inflection points, don't you?
Yeah, I do, and so many people who are listening to this and watching this do as well. They've all stepped into, and just like the human experience, these before and after kind of moments where my life has been marked by this incident or this moment or this choice or this, and I wonder if you can pastorally, practically, there are people who are listening to this and they're going, okay, I have messed up. It's taken everything for me to even believe what you're saying and that God can use me. Mm-hmm. How do I position myself to be used by God? Okay. I'm in that wrestling point right now, where that's, and they're saying, what do I do if I want to be used by God, even though I've made such a mess of my life?
Hey friends, I know that so many of you listening to this are carrying a heavy weight of pain and loss. When we start to process what's happened in our lives, we often find ourselves paralyzed by the pain and not really knowing where to go from here. We even begin to hear or tell ourselves lies like, this is the end of our story. This will define you. And trust me, I've been there. But with the help of others, I was able to navigate my way out of that valley. And at Nothing is Wasted, we exist to help you navigate your pain and even find purpose in that pain. So if you are new to our community and wondering where to start, or if you've been with us for some time and you're just looking to take the next step, we're hosting a free live call just for you. In it, we're going to talk about 5 steps to taking back your story, no matter what you've gone through. In this call, our founder, Davey Blackburn, will share more of his story, and he's going to teach you 5 critical steps you'll have to take to rewrite your own story. This call is 60 minutes long, but I promise you it will be well worth your time, because in it you will learn how to regain a sense of agency and begin thriving, not just surviving in the midst of trying circumstances. Why having more questions than answers may be an essential part of moving forward. How to get rid of the overwhelming negative emotions that tend to bog you down and get you stuck. The one keystone decision that will help you get out of your pain. How to listen to the right voices when everyone seems to have an opinion on what you should do next, and a ton more. If you are feeling weighed down or paralyzed by the pain you've experienced, you don't have to stay there. And Davey will be your guide and show you the way back to thriving. Go to nothingiswasted.com/start here to sign up for this free live call. Or if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, just click the link in the show notes. We've made it extremely easy to sign up, and we're offering multiple dates and time options for you for this live call to work with your calendar. I believe this one step could be the very breakthrough you need to put you on the redemptive path God has for you. Open the browser on your phone right now and go to nothingiswasted.com/start here, or just click the link we've included in the show notes of this episode. We are in your corner, and we can't wait to connect with you soon.
I'm 68 years old as you and I have this conversation. When I was 50 years old, I entered what would be perceived by many as really a golden season of ministry. Our church had just moved onto new property. We had a brand new sanctuary. We were able to pay for it and had very little debt. It filled. It was growing. I was writing books. I was churning out children's books. I was just Mr. Superstar, super cool. And even so much so that the magazine Christianity Today decided to do a profile on me, and they entitled it America's Pastor. I've never wanted that moniker, but that's what they put that on there. What nobody knew, Davey, is that my world was coming apart. Our staff was splintered 1,000 directions. There were yelling matches in leadership meetings. There were missives instead of emails being sent back and forth. People were fighting for budget dollars. There was competition. It was a total mess. And their senior pastor, aka Max, was too busy building his own, reputation to solve the issues and deal with the problems. And I resented my own staff. I didn't want to even talk to them. It was, if we had one of these staff health management tools that they have these days, we would have registered south of toxic. It was a mess. So here's what America's pastor does when he's under stress. I started to drink. I would go across town to a convenience store and buy those large cans of beer, and I'd put it in a brown paper bag, and I'd go out and I'd sit in the parking lot, and I would, to use the phrase that you often hear, I would take the edge off the day. That's what America's pastor does.
Wow.
So to me, that was my inflection point, David. Yeah, that was me right there. That was one of those points where, as I look back, I could have gone this way and ended up in that situation, or gone this way and ended up in that situation. I don't want to sound super spiritual right now because I'm very ashamed that I have that. Well, I'm not ashamed of it. I hate to acknowledge that, but I'm happy to acknowledge that. But I think God talked to me one day in the car, in the parking lot, while I was drinking one of those big cans. I think I heard him say, "Do you see what you're doing? Do you see where you're heading?" And my response was, "I've got it all under control. I'm all right. It's going to be fine. I've got it all under control." And then I sensed the Lord say, "If you got it all under control, why are you sitting in a convenience store parking lot, hiding?" Wow. I didn't even want to go home. And so that's the mess I had made. I was a Jacob. It was a Jacob moment. It was a Jacob moment. The good news is that season didn't last very long. The good news is our church has a board of elders that loved me and I trusted. And so I went to them and I said, it was that very week, I went to them at our weekly meeting and I said, "I've got to tell you what I'm doing. I'm stressed out. I'm not sleeping at night. I'm tempted to drink again. By the way, I still like beer, just not to treat the pain." And they prayed for me. They said, "We're going to take some stuff off your plate. We're going to reorganize a few things." And then I shared it with the whole church. I told the whole church about it, and they loved me through it. And it now is kind of a memory, but it's a part of my story that makes me appreciate the Jacob moment. And I think those moments are very fragile moments, and we've got to be careful during those moments, lest we think that God will give up on us, because He won't. He won't. And He'll use those Thanks for letting me share that. I didn't ask your permission.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you for being vulnerable and transparent like that. Thank you. We take that as a gift, man, like that you would trust us with that. So thank you.
Well, of course. I really don't think I can bear the weight of perfectionism. I don't do very good with that. But when we talk about some of the struggles, the wounds that come into our lives by virtue of our own poor choices, those are the kinds that I'm very acquainted with. And
wow. I wonder, I know that our time is coming to a close here, but you made this pivot a little bit about the church. Last week, as we have this conversation, we just put on our very first roundtable for pastors, where it's called the Healing Leader, in partnership with the Association of Related Churches, ARC. And we're starting to do more of these roundtables where we're calling pastors to, one, take an introspective look at their own pain and start to walk in healing and wholeness, but also to open up and start bringing the healing conversations back into the church. That there's so many hurting people that are coming into the church and allowing people to start unpacking their pain. It was a wonderful, wonderful roundtable, but I wonder if you can just speak for a minute or so about this, in terms of what you see in the state of the church, especially for Christian leaders and pastors. What do they need to do to be healthy, to be whole, and to be able to be catalysts for that kind of a DNA in their church?
Well, you don't want to turn the pulpit into a catharsis where every week you're telling everybody all the bad things you've done. At the same time, you got to be authentic about the challenges and the struggles that you have. I don't think anybody expects a pastor to have all the answers. And it's refreshing when the pastor admits, I don't. And here's where I struggle, and here's where I need your prayers. So authenticity is a true value to pursue in the church. By nature, the pulpit, the title, the role elevates the pastor over people, and that by nature happens. And so you've got to resist that. And the more you can be accessible, honest, authentic, you can get by with fooling people with perceived perfection for about a month, but then you've got to be pretty honest, and that's the way it should be. That's the way it should be.
Wow.
Hey, by the way, our staff weathered that. It did, and our staff is healthy now, and the church is healthy again. And so I don't want to leave the impression that crisis happened. Really, crisis was sidestepped quickly. And many people
was averted
know
there.
About it.
That's great.
And so that's hope. That's hope for maybe some pastors who are passing through some tough times.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. Well, I want to make sure that everybody gets their hands on this new book that you've released. What Jacob's story, God never gives up on you. What Jacob's story teaches us about grace, mercy, and God's relentless love, as well as all the other books that you've written. Some of my favorites are Anxious for Nothing, You'll Get Through This. I mean, these are just wonderful books, especially for our community as they're walking through some deep, dark pain in their life. But Max, thanks so much for spending time with us and just being so vulnerable with your story and generous with your time. We really appreciate it.
I feel very honored to have had these moments with you. I hope we have some more in the future.
Yeah, I would love that, man. Thank you. Well, what do you think, Max?
Lucado, it's officially. Just kidding. Yeah.
Lucado.
Lucado. It doesn't matter. No. Okay. No, that was a great story. I think I was telling you too off air that I, with Aubrey being my name, I get called Audrey or Autumn or whatever. And it's sometimes you just don't know if it's worth correcting it. Like, it's just like, it's fine. It doesn't, they'll figure it out later. It doesn't matter.
My niece's name is Audrey. And I'm like constantly having to flip my brain back and forth between interacting with you and interacting with her.
It's tricky when you know an Audrey.
Tricky. Very tricky.
Oh no, but he is incredible. Just another fantastic conversation. Yeah. And I really appreciated his tenderness towards those who have shame because of their past, because of just even his own vulnerability and his own story. Like, I think he's an empath at heart. Yeah. And, thinking about that through the lens of like Jacob wrestling, and that was really powerful.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, just as how transparent he was through the whole thing, I think that's what really struck me was you kind of expect this like super polished presentation from, and he's just like, hey, let me lay it out there and tell you what I've dealt with. And this, if this can be a warning to somebody. And it was so helpful too, you know, I mean, first of all, the story of Jacob for all of us, it's how imperative it is to wrestle with God and to enter into that wrestling and to be able to drop the pretense, especially with God, and be like, hey, listen, here's where I'm at. And this is what I'm struggling with. This is what I'm upset with you about. This is what I just think there's such a, it's just such a critical juncture in every person's journey to get to that place where you can get extremely honest with God. And we've talked about this and, you know, a lot with at Nothing Is Wasted.
I heard a pastor recently say, you know, because it's a funny moment, right? Jacob wakes up and the angel's wrestling with him. Like, it's weird, right? And he was like, I think it's God, like almost like, hey, God's like picking a fight, like, hey, like almost like a guy who like shoves another guy to get him to fight. Like God is almost trying to like wake up Jacob to be like, know who you are, know who your identity is. Let's wrestle this out together. And that's a really interesting thought to think that God provoked Jacob into that, you know?
Wow. One of the things that that I thought about when he was talking about this is this idea of you know, it's one thing to wrestle with God. I think what's important about wrestling with God is it causes you to remain connected to the vine, as opposed to what is happening a lot right now, and what people are so tempted to do when they go through pain, and is take the questions that you have, tuck them in your back pocket, and walk away from God.
Yeah, totally.
Because what's happening is the construct that you have of God in the middle of your pain is you're not able to reconcile what you've created God to be with the experiences you're going through, especially in this like vending machine, Western American Christianity. And so the idea of what this does when we wrestle with God, it means that we're remaining in the vine. It's creating a perseverance or steadfastness. It's what James will talk about, you know, as you count it all joy under trials, he that remains or is steadfast under trial, he will receive the crown of life. But that word, I just learned this the other day, that word steadfast in the Greek actually means to remain under pressure.
Oh, interesting.
And to not try to escape out from that pressure.
Man.
So when you pair that with the idea of Jacob wrestling with God and remaining under pressure and holding on and saying,
I will not let you go unless
I'm
you
not
bless
letting
me.
go. I'm going to remain under this kind of pressure. Imagine the kind of pressure you're experiencing when you're wrestling with God. It's not like Jacob had the upper hand.
I know, that's
here.
what the story makes it seem like there's an actual match there, and you're like, you know, they're not fairly matched, but it is interesting that God even allows Jacob to wrestle hard, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
So it's just that has really stuck with me, this idea of like, okay, I'm going to remain under pressure.
It's so hard to do that, Davey. Like, I think I would so much rather escape, self-soothe, numb, avoid, like, because to wrestle under the pressure,
Absolutely.
I mean, we know this, right? Like, anecdotally, that's the pressings where the olive oil comes from. Like, we know this stuff. That's the anointing. We've heard it preached, we know it's real, but then when you're in the midst of it and you are in that pressure and it's pressure from God and you're kind of at that boiling point, like, oh man, it's hard to remain steadfast. It is
so difficult too. So I think that's really just notable for all of us as we're experiencing our healing journeys and walking through each one of those. You know, the other thing that really struck me is how vulnerable and transparent he was about his own personal vices and struggles in ministry and struggles with alcoholism. You know, while he's being called America's pastor, he is secretly
in parking lots
hiding
drinking.
this alcohol abuse that is going on. And I think that this is such an epidemic where we're seeing so many pastors and leaders in ministry struggle. I think this is one of the reasons why people have so many questions that are irreconcilable, seemingly. So their leaders or the people that they revere are falling, and so they can't. So instead of taking those questions and wrestling with God about those, again, they're kind of walking out on the church, and so you see this deconstruction happening, this mass exodus. But you and I, we have a lot of empathy for pastors and church leaders.
Big time.
Because we're in it.
We are in it, and I think what is a strange, like a like a double whammy of this season of what you're talking about in the church is, people deconstructing, people distrusting their pastors.
Yeah.
And so you've got the stress in and of itself of being a pastor in a post-pandemic world, which is a whole new thing. And then, or at least in our generation, it's a whole new thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got people who you have loved and served, and suddenly they distrust you. They question you. They're questioning your motives. They're questioning your character, not just your decisions, but like your value and your do you really love Jesus, or do you really understand decolonization? And and so that pressure on a pastor right now is, some of it the Lord's using in wonderful ways. I don't want to totally discount it. Like, I think the Holy Spirit's doing something there. And yet
it's a sifting thing.
It's
like,
a sifting thing.
Jesus told Peter, Satan is asked to sift
That's
you.
It. Yeah. But it is the pain that pastors are carrying right now and the isolation, I do think is unique to this season. And then the difficult part is, as pastors, you're supposed to just take it because you're a leader, and that's what leadership is. And like, in some ways, I feel like leaders and pastors can no longer be humans or image bearers. Like, you can't be like, oh, wait, I'm hurting too,
Right.
And something's messed up.
I was having a conversation. Yeah. We've been doing these, we beta tested these pastor roundtables, the Healing Leader Roundtable. We did one just a couple of weeks ago in Lynchburg, Virginia. And we had Pastor Kevin Myers there, and he founding pastor of 12 Stone Church, incredible leader, pastored it for 35 years, just turned it over to his successor, so to speak. I mean, just a phenomenal story of resilience, of faithfulness. And one of the things that he said in this, we were talking about pastors and how they need a safe space to be able to share with others when they experience what our friend Ken Roberts calls the caution zone. It's like before your life hits crisis zone, you're in a caution zone where it's like things are sliding and slipping fast. My coping mechanisms are becoming unhealthy. There's something and this is going to derail pretty quickly. And I would venture to say virtually every person has experienced this. The problem is pastors, if they experience the caution zone and it slides into crisis zone, they lose their job.
Yeah, totally.
If they make decisions under pressure that are akin to some of the same decisions that many of you guys who are listening, just like, lay people in church, they make the same decision you do. You don't lose your job, they lose their job. So
they lose their job and the ripple effect on the people.
And then on the people and the reputation of the church, right, of Jesus's bride. So there's an added, extreme pressure that's right there. Well, one of the things he said, we have pastors who are trying to find safe spaces, but they're finding spaces that aren't safe because they're like so done with this pressure. They're confessing sin or confessing, it's like, oh man, I'm scared by this thought, or I'm scared by this thing that's to the wrong people. He said everybody wants to talk about David and just like, oh wow, he confessed and he came clean, and and it's like, well, he said, but Nathan couldn't cut off David's head.
Yeah. Wow.
And I was like, oh my gosh, wait a minute, what? He said the reality is that pastors are lacking a Nathan to be able to come to and go, I'm scared about this. They're struggling with this. I'm experiencing this pressure. I've got these coping mechanisms that are not healthy right now. I need some help. Where they're not going to have to like face this fallout of, okay, well, great. Well, now you lost your job, you lost your ministry. We're going to plaster this on to social media, the local news, and social media, and and certainly there are situations where that is necessary. It's supposed to happen, right? But there are a lot of situations where pastors are staying mum. And it's very quickly sliding
because there isn't a safe space for them, or a safe
because
person
there's not a
for
Nathan
them.
for them to.
Wow.
And so I told Ken Roberts, I said, Ken, the work that we're doing with pastors now, we have to become a Nathan.
That's so good.
To help people. And it was like this aha moment. Yeah. So, it's just an incredible thing that what God is opening the doors up for Nothing is Wasted Ministries to do, not only help you guys who are listening to this, just, people who are dealing with trauma, tragedy, major life transition, but also pastors and church leaders ministry leaders to create a holistic approach toward help creating healing environments.
Can you talk briefly about the podcast kind of in beta form? Yeah.
So in beta form, what we're doing now, and this is a great 300th episode for us to really kind
exciting.
of tease this out. We think, we're not positive, we think that the first spin-off podcast that we're going to do is a podcast called The Healing Leader.
Awesome.
And our plan is we're supposed to do between 6 to 8 of these Healing Leader roundtables next year in 2024. Yeah. We're going to have a different legacy leader at each one.
Cool.
So Kevin Myers was our legacy leader at this last one. We'll have a different legacy leader where we do an interview. Session 3 is an interview. And that will be banked as the content that the plan is right now to release that as a new podcast in fall of 2024.
So exciting. Look at what God's doing.
So for church leaders, pastors, ministry leaders, leaders of organizations, I mean, it's just, this is when you're dealing with the pain in leadership, this isn't even, a different kind of nuance within that.
So excited about that.
And then we've got plans to hopefully spin off other podcasts and have some, so stay tuned for that. So 300th episode. We've got some exciting things happening in the future.
Exciting things coming your way. God is not done with Nothing is Wasted yet. Right. Hey, we want to remind you one more time. If you want to join Davy's Zoom call that he does every once in a while, 5 steps to taking back your story. You can find out more at nothingiswasted.com/start here. That's for people who are new here and want to know more about the ministry of Nothing is Wasted and want to learn what it means to take back your story.
Yeah. We also have a big announcement. Aubrey, you just told me this before we went on air. Aubrey's new book, by the way, Big Feelings Day, is an incredible book.
So cute.
We've talked about it so many times. I hope you've picked it up already. It's amazing. And you've got some news.
I have some news. Just before Davey got on, this is so exciting. I just found out that Big Feelings Days is going to be translated into Korean. And so this is my first translated.
It's amazing.
But also, it's such a sweet, tender thing from God. This is going to sound funny to our listeners, but I know your wife, Christy, will appreciate this. I love Korean dramas, and I love Korean culture, and a lot of my friends are South Korean, and this to me is just like a little gift that God was like, the first language it gets translated into is that language of all language. So we're making a joke, but now I feel a little bit like I'm like just one remove from BTS now. So
that's right. That's right. For those of you guys who don't know, my wife Christy is half Korean, and so she is also obsessed with Korean dramas.
Yeah, she and I text about them quite a bit. So. Very fun.
But make sure you pick up Aubrey's book, Big Feelings Day. And while you're at it, go ahead and follow us on Instagram. You can follow Nothing is Wasted at Nothing is Wasted Ministries. You can follow me at Davey Blackburn. You can follow Aubrey at AubSamp. And we would love to interact with you there. We want to thank Sleeping at Last for providing all the music for the Nothing is Wasted podcast. You can go download or stream his music anywhere music can be downloaded and streamed. Make sure if you watch this on the tubes, YouTube, that is, make sure to subscribe. Make sure to rate and review this. We would love for you to drop a review there in Apple Podcasts, that app. That would be incredible. We'd love to hear your stories. And next week we have a phenomenal conversation with Dr. Russell Moore.
This is very exciting. I really like Russ Moore. So this is very fun. He's going to be on the podcast.
Yep. Yeah. So listen to this little clip from our conversation with Dr. Russell Moore.
How did we get here as Christians in America? That these sorts of things are going on?
Well, there's a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons I think is that Tim Keller, who died just this year, he and I talked about this a lot in terms of the shadow side of any strength. There's a shadow side. And this is true in evangelical Christianity. You have one of the reasons that evangelical Christianity has been able to thrive and do some really great things is that it's entrepreneurial and responds to people. And so you're able then to take the gospel out onto the frontier. You don't have to, go through a bureaucratic process to get approval to do that. You go, you put up a tent, you start preaching, And a lot of really, really good things are able to happen with that. A lot of entrepreneurial ways of doing campus ministry and global missions and all of those things. That's all really good. The shadow side to that can be that you can get into a situation where the mob sort of has control. And so what you have to do is to say, we've got to find out what it is that people want us to say and say that. And sometimes that can be insipidly optimistic and sunny. Believe Jesus and you're going to thrive, because that's what people want to hear. And in other cases, that can be dystopian and dark. Your enemies are demonic, and you're right to hate them as much as you do, and you're right to be as scared as you are. I mean, those things work together, and so you end up with that. And I think this is not unique to Christianity, but it ought to be. But it's not unique to Christianity. It's the same sort of thing that's happening kind of institutionally in almost every other area, where you have this dynamic that works where people think, okay, I need to be at the table. And if I'm not at the table, I'm not going to be able to make change. And so that means I need to do what it takes to stay at the table so that I can make change. And to some degree, of course, that's true. You're in any context, you're going to come in and say, okay, here are some things that I'm not going to deal with right now because I've got other things to do. But what happens is you can easily convince yourself that what you're doing is sort of conserving your influence. And the problem is there never comes a time at which you say, okay, well, now I can use my influence. Instead, what happens is over time, when you're afraid of your own people, eventually you start adjusting yourself to whatever you think is going to prevent pain without even knowing that you're doing it.
Hey friend, if you liked this episode, be sure to like and subscribe so that you can stay in the loop every time Nothing is Wasted releases a piece of content here on this YouTube channel.